My name is Kira McGuire, and I am a mental health counselor. I work down on Congress Street with the crew down there at Community Impact. I do outpatient counseling, but I also work in crisis response alongside law enforcement. So I don't do that in Milford. This is the same sort of role that Ashley has here, but I do it in a different community, but we see sort of a lot of the same individuals. So that's my role. I've been working with Amy and the crew for about 4 years now, maybe 5 years, and it just keeps getting better and better. So we can do the next slide. So today we're going to talk about, mental health, like Amy said, 101, so the basics, and we're going to talk about mental illness, which is different than mental health, but a lot of the characteristics can overlap from day to day or hour to hour. And then we're going to talk about de-escalation a little bit further, and that's something that basically just means things have gotten a little more amped up than we are comfortable with, and we want to find a way to address it. So that will be the progression of our presentation tonight, but Judy, I said to everybody else, questions, scenarios, whatever you want. I'd like this to be interactive. So what is mental health? Obviously, it's our well-being, and that can impact us every day. And it's social, it's psychological, it's physical. When we wake up and we're kind of in a headspace, then we kind of have a stomach ache, but we don't know which came first, the stomach ache or the thought that maybe we weren't feeling so well, maybe we were depressed about something or anxious about something. So we're very much connected as people. We can't just kind of put ourselves on a shelf and work on one thing or another. It's all together. So it impacts how we think and feel and how we cope. Mental health is something that we work on every single day, and we'll talk about it. And whether you know it or not, you have ways that you work on your mental health. And by work on, I mean, you can make these great leaps, listen to podcasts and do meditation 2 hours a night and write in your journal every night, or you could just choose to just kind of have some insight during your day, maybe shake hands with somebody, maybe allow someone to cut in line with you at Dunkin' Donuts, and feel good about yourself afterwards. Like those little ways that we work on our mental health, nobody knows about. They're not as flashy as the journaling and the other things that are more external, but those are little ways that we move through the world, that we work on ourselves and we feel kind of like good about ourselves. We volunteer for things, we show up to trainings or to meetings. So those are all ways, believe it or not, that we can work on our mental health. We always have a supply of it, and sometimes it kind of gets a little low and we have to put back in, but there's always something for us to do. Like I said, without any money, without any external factors, we can always work on our mental health. We'll talk a little bit more about mental illness in a minute, but mental health is on a continuum. It's kind of like on a scale. And when somebody says they're having a lousy day, the factors of that lousy day could make it a really good day for someone else. So if Judy's like, this is the best day ever, to someone else and be like, that's a lousy day. What are you talking about? Like, I won the lottery last week. So, so really it exists on a continuum. And if we're in a certain space for a few months and we have one day that we're feeling really good, like that's really good and we feel really good about that. Other people have been in a good mood and suddenly something happens and they're not feeling that great. So it's on a continuum, and it's every single day changing with us, our mental health. So what do we do? Like I said, we can do a million different things to work on our mental health every day. We talked about the big flashy ones, but the basics really are, what do we eat? What are we eating? Are we stopping and grabbing a bag of chips because we're late and we're running around and you're drinking a soda for energy? Or are we really kind of trying to be intentional with how we eat, at least a couple of times a week? Sitting down, thinking what's on our plate, eating for fuel, going to bed thinking, oh, I feel pretty good about the meals I had today. Maybe I stopped at the farm stand and got some corn, and I love corn. Believe it or not, that really can trigger into how we feel about ourselves. So food, family, Animals, a little sheepy there. Sleep, I know, everybody says we should get 8 hours of sleep a night, and Amy doesn't sleep at all, and she does okay. So, you know, where do we get the sleep from if we can't fall asleep? And if we fall asleep and we wake up all night and we don't feel rested and we try again the next night and it's the same, it can really impact us. And all the messages are, well, you should be getting that sleep, but it can be elusive. But there's certainly ways that we can work on it, you know, and we can talk about that a little bit, but that is a big part of our mental health, believe it or not, as well. And then we can move into managing our mental health through medication, therapy, other professional supports. You could join a group, you can go to walk-in places where you feel seen, where you feel supported. It doesn't have to be anything formal. You know, there's online groups now, there's like Hey Peers, a peer group, there's warm lines, which you probably heard of hotlines. Well, now there's warm lines that you can call, that you can actually talk to people about what's going on. So there's a whole bunch of ways that we can manage our mental health. Everything, like I said, from just, you know, capturing a friend in the moment and having a really funny conversation, sending a funny meme between people, catching up with family, all the way to professional supports and professional resources. But, you know, I really just wanted you guys to know that you can experience positive well-being and feel like you're having good mental health, even if you have a mental health diagnosis. And if you don't have a mental health diagnosis, you can still have crappy days and crappy mental health. So one is not exclusive as the other, from the other, I should say. You know, you don't sort of get rubber stamped with, well, now every day is going to stink. Or, you know what, you don't have any mental health diagnosis, so good for you, you're going to be happy forever. That is not the way it works. So I just thought that was important to bring up. You can go next slide, Amy. So then we move a little bit into mental illness, which sounds more serious because it is more serious. It's an illness, and it's so many that are combined into mental illness. There's a big book this big that's probably on a shelf somewhere here that contains everything. But basically it's a clinical disorder that somebody has said to you, a professional, a trained professional has said, so I'm thinking this is what's impacting you, and here's what we can do about it. Just like if you had a sprained ankle or a chronic back injury, you can kind of connect the dots. So it affects your mood and your thinking and ultimately your behavior. And you know, it could be anything, like I said, from depression to anxiety to the more serious disorders that we know about, sort of like a schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. And those are ones that maybe just require a little bit more eyes on and consistency in managing than others. And the mental health becomes a concern when it's a frequent barrier to you living the life you want to. When other people in your life that you care about are saying, I can't put up with your behavior anymore. You've got to find somebody else to talk to. I'm not doing this with you anymore. I don't want to live with you anymore. Like, that's a significant, if we go back to the continuum, you know, that's the end that we have not attended to many, many things along the way. I don't want to feel like I'm just mongering this fear that if you get a clinical diagnosis, suddenly nobody wants you around. That's certainly not the case. But when you're told you need to, or it would be beneficial to manage something, you know, we all have to kind of take that responsibility and manage it in the ways that the professionals guide us. So again, it becomes a concern when it's a frequent source of stress and impacts your ability to function day to day. And again, it's your ability. You know, if you receive a diagnosis of a mental illness and suddenly you can't compete professionally in diving, were you going to anyways? I'm not. No, a lot of us are not going to be at that level. But can it impact somebody who's at a very high level of competition? Sure. So I think it's important to be realistic and think, how is this impacting my life? And we can really catastrophize and say, well, that's just great, I'm never going to be able to go to college, I'm not going to have a family, when oftentimes that's not the case. You know, that's just kind of our take on something like that. So I just want that to be clear, that the symptoms can cause distress, but they don't have to upend our lives if we manage the way that, you know, we're guided to manage. So struggles with mental illness obviously can make you just feel crappy. And by that I mean, like, it's inside of you, nobody sees it, but maybe you don't want to even roll out of bed. You want the lights out, you want the blankets over your head. It sometimes is too much energy to think to return a phone call to someone that you actually really like. Never mind someone you don't really like. You know, it's too much energy to think of getting up and making breakfast. So you stop and get something at the store that's right next to your work, so you only have to park once. You know, when we are impacted by something like a depression or anxiety, it sweeps us up if we don't manage it, or if we undermanage it. And it consumes a lot of our lives, it consumes a lot of our thoughts, because we sort of create a black cloud that comes with us everywhere. Whether it's real or we perceive it, it doesn't matter. Even if we're perceiving it, it's real to us. So it can follow us through work and, like I said, relationships and family and friends. And an array of factors can impact behaviors when our mental health is struggling. If we physically don't feel well, we're going to feel our mental health decline a little bit, because it's really hard. We're in survival mode, right? If we get very sick, or we have the flu, or we get a more serious diagnosis, we just want to make it through the day. So our mental health is going to, you know, be a challenge for us to keep that up, as well as our physical health. That's a lot. And other impacts, you know, receiving bad news, having a loss of a friendship or a person in your life, losing a job, losing a pet, those can all impact us and impact our behaviors. And what we do in those moments isn't necessarily what we would have done the week before on like a good day, but those can really impact us and our behaviors, and it's temporary, but sometimes in the moment it feels like it's going to last forever. And so, that's okay, no. And just in shifting towards like the de-escalation piece of this, when actions become mean, aggressive, hostile, that's when it can push people away, when we can become afraid to work or to be in spaces that other people are displaying that behavior pretty regularly. Or even once, but you sort of can't manage with them and they can't manage themselves. It can be frightening. Has everybody here seen somebody be aggressive? You? Yeah.
What, like here?
No, just
okay,
in your life.
In general, yeah,
Yeah?
of course.
Judy, have you ever seen someone sort of be angry?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about you? Yeah. Never. Okay, utopia over here.
Not yet.
Not yet. Over here?
Once or twice.
Yeah.
I've been that person.
You've been that person. Love that
Bye.
response.
I had
And
one person join.
what's important is those aggressive behaviors that somebody's displaying, while it's really uncomfortable for us to see, as I'm sure it was for you, it's uncomfortable for them to feel it too. And it's hard to look at that behavior if somebody's, say, screaming at you or throwing something, and have empathy and say, oh, well, I'm sure they're having a bad day today, because we're a little frustrated. Like, well, I didn't do anything. Why are we in this position? So it's sort of like everyone's trying to get a need met, but nobody's really connecting with each other, and the communication has gone a little awry. So I'm hoping to bring some of that to the forefront in a bit. But this is how our mental health goes into our behaviors, and then when it's not really being tended to, and it can move to aggression. So I'm gonna have you guys do something. Is that okay? You look scared.
Me?
Judy, is it okay? All right, go ahead. Can you see? Is it okay? All right,
Scared.
close your eyes.
Scoot.
Close your eyes. Everybody's safe. Nobody's coming in and dumping water on you or anything like that. So close your eyes. And we're going to go to the most mundane part of your day. Whatever is the routine for you. Say you go to Dunkin' Donuts every day, or the supermarket. And say this is the day that you're doing it. And you also have 3 or 4 other things to do. But you've got to go into Dunkin' Donuts, you've got to get your iced coffee, it's 90 degrees, you've got so many things to do, the parking lot was crowded, you're trying to find the app on your phone, it logged you out, you're trying to log back in, you can smell the coffee brewing, you can smell the muffins, they're putting them out, it's busy, you can see the drive-through, you're wondering when am I going to get served, you're on your phone, you're texting, you're waiting, you do this every day, you know what to expect, who's that person behind the counter, oh they're new, okay, and oh I'm up next, this is great, and then bang! Somebody slams their fists down on the counter. You're not thinking about the parking lot, you're not thinking about your iced coffee. If any of you felt any kind of reaction, you don't have to speak it now, but just remember what that was. Perhaps you felt your stomach flip, or a little tightness in your chest, or your eyes flinched open. So you're still standing there, but now you just want to leave. But you've noticed that this person is angry and they're standing between you and the door. And you're looking around and people are looking down at their phones, really awkward, and you're not really sure what to do. And the managers are ignoring this person, and the person is yelling and yelling and yelling. And everybody's ignoring them. Then someone comes out from behind the counter and says, what can I get for you? And the person just yells and screams and is kind of not even making sense with the demands. And you still want to leave, but you still can't get to the door. And now you're hot and you're sweaty and you feel like you actually want to get sick and you don't know what this person's doing. And the manager's trying to help them and they're getting donuts and coffee and giving them complimentary gift cards, asking if they need to use the restrooms, and the person is just yelling and screaming, and they run out the door. And you can open your eyes. And you're safe. You think. But then you look, and now you're thinking, are they getting in my car? Where did they go? And you try to watch them out in the parking lot, and you haven't seen them. And now you don't even want your iced coffee, because it's just not feeling a certain way. And you were just exposed to something that you did not expect. This was part of your routine day. You weren't going to a place that was a volatile atmosphere. You weren't going anywhere that you could expect people to be arguing or fighting. It's Dunkin' Donuts. People are happy in Dunkin' Donuts. And you weren't in the moment, you were thinking about a whole bunch of different things. But that reaction of somebody yelling like that, I should say that action, and your reaction, whatever it was, is your response to trauma. And there's big, huge traumas, and there's little traumas. But in that moment, it overwhelmed you enough that you sort of shut down and didn't really know what to do. So we'll call that a trauma for the moment. But however you felt and whatever your physical body, and everyone had a different response to that, whatever that is your response. It's your response to a threat. It's your built-in safety system in your body that wants to protect you. We all have them. And whatever you individually felt is very unique to you. And I say that because when we move into de-escalation, what is the most important part of it is to know that everybody responds differently to a threat. And everybody's perception of a threat is different. If you are from a place either in your home or your work that there's a lot of yelling and screaming, a lot of banging around, a lot of swearing, and you hear something like that in Dunkin' Donuts, you might think, it's just another Tuesday. Although you'd probably be concerned because you don't know this person, but it maybe wouldn't alarm you as much as somebody that has little children at home, really doesn't get out that much, lives in a very quiet world where there's no yelling and screaming. They might be totally overwhelmed to hear that. And so what society has done is shifted the burden of responsibility from the person who's behaving a certain way and who's unable to manage their aggression. They've shifted that onto the people that are supposed to handle it. And if you don't handle it effectively, people question, well, couldn't you de-escalate it? Well, didn't you fight back? What do you mean? Well, that is garbage. Underline, period. That is garbage. Because somebody that's grown up in a world where they've never even had a conflict with somebody is not going to handle the man yelling and screaming in Dunkin' Donuts like a retired Navy SEAL. And to expect that everybody does the same is just bonkers. So the first part about being able to manage aggression, conflict in this situation or any situation is knowing your response to it. How am I going to respond? What tools do I have available to me? If you think I just want to crawl under the sofa and hide, there's nothing wrong with that. But don't expect yourself to jump up and kung fu chop somebody and then be mad at yourself that you didn't. So just the first step of knowing your individual reaction, your relationship to conflict and trauma is really important. To give yourself, the support that I can handle it in the moment. It's not going to be the way this person handles it, but I can handle it. And we'll move into that a little bit more. So what is aggression? Aggressive behavior, we talked about it. It's kind of like, when you see it, and everyone has an individual perception of what they believe aggressive. Somebody might be doing a work presentation and they might be very animated and passionate, and you leave there so happy about the content, thinking that was the best presentation I ever had. And then your friend says, oh my God, he was so aggressive. And you're thinking, did we see the same thing? But that's our lens that we look through. And it's all based on how we lived, our exposure daily, what range of emotions we see in people, how we feel when we see really big emotions or hear really big emotions. So when we get into a place that we think we have aggression coming at us, that basically is just a shift from the needs of you to the needs of somebody that's acting in a really big emotional, dysregulated sort of way. So when somebody is not taking into consideration everybody in Dunkin' Donuts that's waiting in line, the people behind the counter, the small children there, when they don't care about that and they just want to yell and scream to try to get their needs met, you've moved into aggression. That person does not care about the needs of everybody else. They don't think this could scare somebody. There's children here that would be scared. They have made it all about themselves and whatever the agenda is. And that person basically is just not in control of themselves. And people talk a lot about, de-escalating people. How do we de-escalate? So we don't de-escalate anyone. People de-escalate themselves. People de-escalate themselves. There's no magic de-escalation wand. There's no sentence that's going to work every time. People have a responsibility to de-escalate themselves, and they are the only ones that can do it. Sure, we could offer some tools and some suggestions, but if somebody has sort of shut down and they are strictly working to get their own agenda across, we might have to just set a boundary. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but the important part of that is that, you know, the communication is really stunted if somebody has reached that point that they're so aggressive. They're not engaging in a back and forth with you, they're not taking turns talking, you know, and despite you saying, listen, I hear you, they're just gonna keep trampling you. So this is when there's a breakdown in communication, the hostility has kind of come to the surface, and the agenda has shifted. So what's behind aggression? What is going on? It's pretty simple, right? I mean, it looks different on a 2-year-old than a 42-year-old, but it's kind of the same thing. It's an attempt to get a need met. Maybe the 2-year-old doesn't know what the need is, but maybe the 42-year-old doesn't either. And so they just sort of act a certain way until they can put the pieces together and figure it out. But it's a lack of self-regulation in situations where there's an opposing opinion or a rule, or, you know, the store is closed, or we ran out of cheese pizza, or whatever it is, you know, and somebody's going to take that a certain way, and they're sort of going to internalize it and think, this is bad, and I'm going to let these people know it's really bad. And combine, you know, with an inability to manage the associated feelings and kind of have the insight to think, well, if I yell and scream about the pizza, I'm going to look like an idiot. I have family with me, they're going to think I'm an idiot. And I come to this pizza place every week, they're not going to want me back here. So people sometimes lack the ability to have that little pause and think it through, and they just lash out. So that's kind of what we're talking about. Does that make sense? Does that paint like a picture? Okay. Does anybody have any questions about anything we've talked about, or the difference between like mental health, mental illness, and now moving into some negative behaviors and emotions? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No. I just, you know, in addition to the man that ran out of the pizza, there are aggressive communication features in some mental health disorders, and it's just part of it. So they could be found, and if somebody's experiencing psychosis, maybe they have a diagnosis that they experience psychosis and they're not taking their medication, and maybe they're not engaging in kind of any therapy or any connections that give them insight into what's going on with them. So they develop some hallucinations, and they think that somebody is talking to them at night, and they can yell and scream at them, you know, maybe in their living room, but to family or friends that are in their area that do not understand the hallucination, it can sound scary. It can be scary. And, you know, so while that's different, it still sounds the same. So, you know, the lack of self-regulation combined with an inability or unwillingness to manage the feelings is different than the aggression that can come secondary to a diagnosis. So I just wanted to make that differentiation. But it sounds the same. It sounds the same. And it can be received the same by us if we don't know what's going on, you know, and it can still be scary. So when someone explodes, right, and has this big outburst, like the guy Dunkin' Donuts, what's going to happen? A number of things can happen, right? What are some different scenarios that could happen? Somebody's in a store and they're yelling and screaming and they're banging on the counter. What can happen? How's that going to end up? Anybody?
Security.
Security. And what's security going to do?
Scare them more.
Scare them more. I'm sorry?
Make them angrier.
Yeah, because they're going to probably say, so you need to leave, and you're probably not going to get your iced coffee, and they might even get angrier. How else can that end or be managed?
Arrest.
Arrest, right? It might get really bad. So he tells security, you know, I'm not leaving, and he throws the iced coffee in the security guard's face. Well, now they call the police, and now it's a big thing. And this can also end by people, and I think I said it in this scenario, people might want to pacify the person. In the scenario that I gave to you, I had the manager running out with complimentary gift cards. Here, just take these. Let's just make this go away. And that can feel very familiar to somebody. Because if they've had these big aggressive emotions throughout their life, and the people in their life have responded with, what can we do for you? Oh, I'll give you money. I'll put gas in your car. Take my car. No, I'll pay for your dinner. I'll pay for your school loan. You know, that has been habituated then, and that's what the expectation might be for the person. That, okay, well, when I'm in a certain way, everybody's going to jump in to make me feel better, to soothe me. And if that doesn't happen automatically, they're gonna up the emotions, right? Stomp their feet, like quite literally, until they get their needs met. So while it can end, you know, quickly, it sometimes goes on and on, because if it's someone that's in a workplace who's consistently behaving in this way, and the manager says, all right, well, okay, we'll give you a raise then. And then 3 months later, they're having another big meltdown, and they say, all right, we'll give you a private parking spot, right up front, right? Where does it end? And you know what else happens when those people get the positive attention? All the other people are thinking, what are we doing here, right? So it really creates an interesting dynamic. And it's a short-term gain for the person. They get their way. But it's a long-term loss, because who can function that way consistently for the rest of their life? You know, that's quite a task to lay at someone and say, this is the way you're going to get your needs met. You're going to yell and scream. People are actually going to hate you and probably be afraid of you, but this is how you're going to act. And they feel like that's the way that they have to communicate their needs then. So while immediately they might think, oh, look I got my way. The long term, they are just really sabotaging themselves from having healthy relationships, from having self-esteem, positive regard, and it does no good. So how does someone else's outburst impact us when we see it, when we feel it, when we're in the Dunkin' Donuts in the scenario, we're standing there? How does it make us feel? We talked about how they might feel. This is us. So there's physiological changes. So this could be when I clapped and your eyes were closed, did your stomach flip? Did you feel tightness in your chest? Did your breath kind of come out a little bit? Did you feel like a little electricity that could maybe be a little dump of adrenaline? That's a physiological change in us. And that's very normal, and that's something, like I said, we are born with. It's a threat response. Our body knows what to do when it perceives a threat. We can't sustain that for a very long time, but for a quick moment, we are prepared to either fight, take flight, freeze, or sort of hide away, and we'll talk about those, and those are threat responses. But everybody has one, and this is what I led with, saying you are best suited to know what yours is, and that will inform how you will respond to a threat. So that's the physiological change, like what's happening in us when we feel a threat. Like if you see a terrible crash, you know, in a parking lot, do you just run to your car and lock the doors? It's okay. It's okay. Do you go over and stand and video? Do you go to your car and see if there's any towels and see if you can help? Or call 911? Right? Everybody kind of has a preset for what they're going to respond as. What are the emotional changes that you absorb when somebody is just sort of blowing up with this aggression? There's emotional changes, obviously. We could maybe find ourselves trying to pacify, saying everything's gonna be okay, I understand it, and then you get home and you kind of feel like kind of gross. Like, what was I doing? Why didn't I tell him off? Why did I go along with him? Or why would the boss let him do that? You know, those are the emotional changes that somebody dumping these, you know, aggressive behaviors on us can happen. And then the behavioral changes. Do we change our behavior to anticipate that this is the person that blows up in our life? You're working in a place, if you think there's a certain person that comes in here every Wednesday afternoon, do you just say, I'm not going there on Wednesday afternoons? Even though I love going there on Wednesday afternoons. You know, do we change our behavior? Do we modify ourselves because of somebody else's aggressive behavior? So we're just going to talk a little bit about the threat response styles that I mentioned. And again, these are all born with you. They develop over your life. They are there to help you, not hurt you. In the moment you don't know it, but the design is to keep you safe. So fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. I think people know what fight is, right? So there's an aggressive person coming at you. What is an example of fight? Anybody? What would fight look like? Anything.
Stand your ground.
Stand your ground.
Yep.
Maybe make yourself big, you know. No, you're not getting in here, right? What else would be fight?
Physical or verbal altercation.
Yeah, so you could do something, maybe shove them. Hey, get out of here. What are you doing? Right? Throw something at them. Get out of here. You can't come in here and do that stuff. So that's fight. You didn't plan it out. You didn't come seeking this, but you're feeling unsafe and you're trying to defend yourself or the other people. Like Jeff said, you know, I'm standing my ground so you can't get to the people behind me. You know, so that's a fight response to an aggressive behavior. And then flight, does anyone know what that is? I mentioned it
Run.
briefly. Run! Get the heck out of here, right? And that's okay. They're all okay. And you're pre-programmed. So you run out the back door. So while someone's standing there saying, nope, you can't come in here, you run out the back door and hop in your car. And that's okay. That's okay. Freeze. And some of these have overlapping characteristics. They're not sort of all contained separately. But freeze is sort of, is this really happening? Oh my God. What am I going to do? Oh my God, why didn't anyone say anything? Is this happening? I can't believe this is happening. This must be a dream. I can't even believe this. Oh my God. Maybe it'll go away if I close my eyes really tight. Nope, still here. That's freeze. We feel like our legs are in quicksand. We might have auditory exclusion. We can't hear traffic going by. We can't hear the phones ringing. We might even get a little black in our peripheral vision. We're frozen. People are saying things to us and we see the lips moving, but we don't know what's going on. We feel disconnected from reality. We're frozen. We're frozen. And then fawn. Fawn is pretty new over the last 5 years or something along those lines, but they added fawn in to sort of encompass a response where you sort of just fade away. So somebody comes in, it's very aggressive, you've got somebody fighting them, you've got somebody that ran out the back door and fled, somebody that's sitting there and can't believe it's happening, and you just kind of like, oh boy, you know, and you just sort of wither away. You fawn. It's overwhelmed you, and you cannot respond. So you sort of fade away. So all of these responses, like I said, are expected, and this is the way you're wired. However, Just because you froze for a moment does not mean you can't then say, oh, I froze because now I know I always freeze at first, but I'm going to stand up and say, no, you can't come in here. Or just because you started fighting, it doesn't mean you can't say, wait a minute, I know this person doesn't mean it. I'm just going to stand here and just tell them, that's not acceptable behavior, they need to leave. So you can jump from one response to the other. But the secret is you need to know and acknowledge, oh, this is what I always do at first. This is what I always do. But I'm going to choose something different. And if you stay where you are, that's okay too. But notice, like I said, what is going on in your body, and that kind of can spell out where you are. If you're still feeling your heart's racing really, really fast, feeling like you might throw up, you might have a hard time transitioning from being frozen to standing up and fighting somebody. So you always want to check in on your body and see if they're going to come along with you if you decide to stand up and confront somebody. So the people, and I put it in here, it sounds weird, but go to sleep. Who thinks you could go to sleep if somebody came in and they were yelling and screaming? Well, believe it or not, it's a way that people shut down. Babies do it. Dogs do it. People shut down because their nervous system is so overwhelmed that it wants to protect them, and it just says, you just go to sleep. So it might be something that you're thinking, how the heck can this person be napping when this is going on? But that's our body's physiological response sometimes to an overwhelming, stressful event. So I just wanted to point those out so you understood that it runs the whole gamut and there's no wrong. We are the way we are. But just know what your response would be, and know, is that what I would want, or maybe would I want another option? And I could always flip from one to the other if I wanted. So what do we do then? Safety, safety, safety. If we're being confronted by somebody who's aggressive, safety. And I don't mean just physical safety, right? Emotional safety. That's first, before the physical safety. We need to protect ourselves. Okay? And know your limits and know your plan just means if you're going to be anywhere, if you're going out late at night into the city, if you're working here, if you're in another area, that you're going to encounter people who have big emotions and big feelings and maybe behaviors, talk about it with other people. Talk about it with Amy. Talk about it with staff. Know what your options are. Go over scenarios, because if your mind has never considered an option that this might happen, it's not going to know what to do when the time comes. So talk about these things. Allow your mind, like when you sat there and you went so graciously into the Dunkin' Donuts when I instructed you, talk about these things. Think about it when you're driving home maybe. Yeah, that guy was really mad. What if he had started banging on the table? What would I have done? Think about it. And when you think about it in the safety of your car or at night and there's music on, it's not as scary as in the moment, but it allows your mind to consider the possibility, because your mind doesn't know if it's real or you're just making it up or it really happened. Your mind doesn't know. It's reacting. Even if you're thinking of it in your car, you're going to get a little rush of adrenaline just thinking about it. But if you consider the options, then maybe if the scenario occurs, it's not going to seem so foreign to come up with a solution that keeps you safe. So I would just say, know what your plan is. Know what your plan is for being confronted here. Know what, can you tell someone to leave? Can you lock the door? Know all those things before you need to know all those things. And that is only gained through asking and talking about it and talking through scenarios. Saying, hey, I heard this on the news the other night. What if that happened here? Talk about it. And again, that just kind of desensitizes you a little bit to the possibility that something scary can happen. So, what strategies do you have? I said it in the beginning, a quiet mom who's at home with her children and making sourdough bread and, knitting and homeschooling her kids. is going to have a very different reaction than an MMA fighter if there's a threat. So we cannot expect that we would behave in a way that our lifestyle has never adapted to. So think about it. What strategies do you have? Some people are really good at talking. Some people are good at making a joke, right? Maybe someone could bring up a funny meme on their phone really fast. Maybe somebody else is fast and they can run and they can get someone from the top floor. Or they can run and find the supervisor, right? Think about it. Hey, if I was in a situation, where would I fit in? What would I do? And even communicate that. You know, if you're somewhere in the office and somebody comes in and they're yelling, you could say, like, if this guy doesn't leave or if this woman continues, I'm going to run upstairs and get a supervisor. You know, why don't you say you have to go to the bathroom? You could text it to the person standing next to you so they don't know, right? You know, prepare a little bit ahead of time. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But just be thinking about, what strategies do you have? What can you do? Can co-regulation work? So if somebody comes in and they're very heated about something, and you just show up all chill and say, hey, what's going on? Do they come down and match your energy? Or does that just set them off? You're going to know real quickly if it's one or the other. And maybe co-regulation won't work. And maybe you have to do something else. And, you know, can you collaborate? Can you say to someone, all right, it sounds like this is a really big problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a pad of paper and we're going to just brainstorm some ideas. Does that sound good? Yep. Okay. So why don't you sit down and I'm going to sit over here and you're always going to sit by a door just in case it doesn't work out and you have to flee. So you're thinking while you're talking to somebody, you're saying, listen, we're going to work this out together. Okay. So let's each take a piece of paper. Let's write down some solutions to the problem. And we'll put them together in the end and see what we can do. So if you can de-escalate by bringing the person in to collaborate with you, that's a win-win, right? And again, there's no one thing that's going to de-escalate a situation. People de-escalate themselves, but you can try different things. It doesn't mean you have to stick to it. If you try to talk to somebody and they just get more angry and more, I would say abandon that. And, you know, sometimes people go into people-pleasing mode and say, I'm really sorry this happened, I'm really sorry that you're feeling this way. You don't have to bend over backwards if somebody is trampling over you with aggression. You don't have to. You could say nothing. And they can yell and scream, and that's going to be the only thing in the air. They can wind themselves out a little bit, and then you could maybe say, okay, I'm going to be stepping out. I'm going to be calling someone to come down and talk with us, so if you want to have a seat, you know, based on if it seems like that's something the person would accept. A lot of it's going to be you trying different things. But, you know, you have control over the boundary. It might not feel it in the moment, but you have control. So while you're talking to somebody and trying to appease them or fulfill or validate what their concern is, you also should be thinking, when am I leaving? When am I going in the back room and locking the door? And calling maybe a supervisor, or, you know, if police are needed in a dire situation. Be thinking of that so you can hold both things at once. You know, you can be having a thoughtful response and strategizing, and also thinking, all right, if he comes on this side of the table, I'm going in that bathroom and I'm locking the door. You know, you can be doing two things at once. And you should be doing two things at once. Does that make sense? So that's your boundary, right? And you have control over your response. Just because someone's yelling and screaming, it does not need to indicate a response from you. You can say something like, so, I'm feeling like this is not a great time to talk. Could we arrange a time to talk tomorrow? Or I can give you a call tonight. You know, and you can talk just like I'm talking. If somebody's up here yelling, you don't have to match their energy up here. Sometimes by being down here, it brings somebody down. But again, you don't need to be the one trying to make peace with somebody who is aggressive and not managing their behaviors as is expected. And people can be upset and still have a conversation. We're not talking about that. We're talking about someone who's aggressive and hostile and scaring you. You know, so we don't need to sort of bend over backwards and give them everything they want. You can set a boundary, like, so I'm going to be leaving. Call my supervisor and you can leave. You know, whatever the training is, stick with it and just know that's your boundary. A boundary doesn't have to be big and mean and scary and one more step. You know, that's not a boundary. It's knowing that you have peace by saying, okay, if he doesn't leave in 2 more minutes, I'm going in the back room and locking the door. That's it. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to say it to them. You know, that's a boundary. It's something you do for yourself. You do it for yourself, to keep yourself safe. Next one. So action versus reaction, right? So it's important to know that when somebody has an intention to bring in a whole bunch of aggression into a room, it's always going to catch us off guard because they've just, you know, completed an action and we are just simply reacting to them, right? And action always beats reaction. So we're always going to feel a little off balance. But the same happens in reverse. So you can flip it and you can be the one taking action. You know, while they're sitting there yelling and screaming, you can think, all right, I'm going to go in that back room, I'm going to call Amy, I'm going to go out to my car. So while they're talking and they're doing, you know, whatever it is they're doing, you can maybe look down at your phone and then leave. So now they might come out after you and be yelling, but now you're the one who's committed an action, right? So their reaction is to catch up to you and you're always going to be in the lead. So whoever sort of makes the big movement first is going to be the one taking the action and you'll be reacting to it. But again, you could be the one that's taking an action to remove yourself from the situation or create a boundary or get help. And you know, it's as simple, an action doesn't have to be something big and grand. It can be just taking a breath. Like, okay, I feel like I'm panicking a little bit. I'm going to take a breath. That's taking an action. You know, that's doing something. It's doing something positive for yourself. It's taking control of the situation. It's showing yourself like, this is really hard, but I think I could do this. You know, taking a breath. Think about what you want to do. Oh, I've thought of this before. I can do this. And remember, if you freeze right away, it doesn't mean you're going to stay frozen. You can flip it and take a little bit of an action to signal to yourself like, I'm okay. I got this. I can do this. That's really, really important to do. And even if you are frozen, you can still fake yourself out of it by saying, I can do this. I can do it. I can do it. Okay? And, you know, just so, again, I keep saying it, but it's really important to know what kind of a response is your norm. Like, what do? Are you the fight person? Are you the fawn person? It's a wide range, but to know how you respond is going to let you off the hook for responding a way that you could never access. That would be someone else's response, you know, and yours could be a certain way. So again, you know, manage your pace. If somebody comes in yelling and screaming, this is BS, this isn't what I was told, I don't want this, unbelievable. You can manage your own pace. You can say, okay, so I'm going to get a piece of paper and a pen. I'm going to write this down because I want to make sure that I get everything that you're saying. So, just hang on a minute. Does that feel like a very different pace, right? But you can do that. And while you're doing that, it's calming you as well. You know, it feels better for you than you matching their energy and screaming with them. So, they're not leading the way. You know, you always are in control of yourself. And less is often more. I love to use silence in therapy. So sometimes just sitting. And if somebody's yelling about something, all they're going to hear is themselves. Imagine that. Sounds kind of funny. When they're not getting a response that maybe they're used to in their life, it might bring about a totally different solution. Consider the need they're trying to meet. Like I said, you know, as a 2-year-old, they're yelling and screaming and banging on the floor, and as a 42-year-old, they could be doing the same thing. So, but what is the need they're trying to get met? And if somebody's yelling and screaming because, and you read through the lines and you can understand what it's about, they're almost like a child throwing a temper tantrum. You know, and that can sometimes, I know I've done that when I'm doing crisis work. Somebody can kind of be coming off as really big and loud, and they're very childlike, and they're trying to get a need met in a really unhealthy and dysfunctional way because they haven't learned a different way. But it doesn't mean that you need to step into that world. You know, you can manage your behavior the way you always do. But it's something that maybe you could consider. And trust yourself. Trust yourself to say, I can handle this. I know what I'm doing. I got this. Trust yourself. Believe in yourself. However you respond is right. Don't compare yourself. Second guess yourself. It's okay to tap out. It's okay to say, I'm going to go sit in my car. I'm out. If somebody's yelling and someone else, you know, Walter might say, oh no, I know this guy's always yelling and screaming, it's fine. If it doesn't feel good for you, you can say, yeah, I'm not feeling comfortable. I'm actually just going to sit outside and take a few breaths. You know, that's okay to say. You don't have to sit there and sort of pretend that it feels okay because you're from a different place and it impacts you differently, like we talked about. So it's okay to say, I'm going to go sit out front, or I'm going to step outside and call someone, or watch a video. It's okay to tap out for a moment or for the rest of the day. So what do you feel after something like this happens, right? That's important too, because say there was a big event and everybody responded a certain way, and say the supervisors had to come, or the police had to come, or Jeff had to come down here, and then it gets sort of managed and everybody leaves, and okay, you go home and you go to bed, and now you're laying there and your eyes are wide open and you keep replaying it in your mind. Should I have done something? Or what was he yelling? Like, right? So it's really important to think of how you may feel afterwards. And it's important to come up with a plan for that. Maybe approach a supervisor and say, can we talk tomorrow? Because I didn't feel really well last night. I didn't sleep well. Can I talk to you about it? And that's really, really important to close the loop on a trauma response. Because remember, when you initially got activated and you had a trauma response, there's chemicals dumped in your bloodstream. It's not just sort of what you're thinking. It's a physical change in your body. And then you're trying to manage, aggression or hostility in a tough situation. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. So it makes sense then that you would want to talk it through with somebody that you trust afterwards. Maybe don't freak out like someone close to you to say, oh my gosh, this guy came in yelling and screaming and he was banging on. If you know somebody's going to be upset by that, maybe don't tell them. But tell people that you know that you can trust the information with. Okay? And don't struggle alone. We carry each other. We don't have to be best friends, but we carry each other through our lives. Whether it's just seeing people once a week, talking to people 5 times a week. This is what we do. We walk each other through our lives. We carry each other when we're not feeling well. And this is our, this is community. This is humanity. So if you heard about an incident and then you see somebody else, you could check in on them. Oh, I heard about that the other night. How's that going for you? You feeling okay with that? Did you eat last night? Did you sleep? Check in on people. Maybe they were waiting for you to ask. But we're all there for each other. We all support each other, whether it's down there or up here. We're all a big community and we all support each other. So don't struggle alone. That's it. Does anybody have any questions, comments, something that you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Anybody?
It's awesome.
Anything? Ashley, anything?
Can your trauma responses change?
Yes, absolutely. That's a really good question. They sure can. And they can change because you do things to change them. When people meditate consistently, they notice that they have more control and they don't go into sort of a freeze response. Theirs is more of a controlled response because they don't have the level of panic. People can go and take training in different areas. They start doing jujitsu and they feel like they're walking a certain way. They feel a little bit stronger. Somebody comes in and yells and screams and they think, oh, we do this 3 times a week on the mats at the gym. You know, you never want to obviously be physical with somebody first, but you feel sort of like, oh, I'm pretty strong. I've been working out a lot. So yeah, absolutely. The things that you bring into your life can absolutely impact your threat response. And the more you lean into information and the more you like watch videos about it or read about it, the brain's really interesting what it does. It's very flexible. It's pliable. So yes, it absolutely can change your responses. And you probably do over your lifetime, to be honest.
I was gonna
multiple
share.
times.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
share an experience.
Yeah.
I would identify more as the fawn from my like whole life, and then through doing this role, Amy can tell you, I have a thing where my chest gets red if I get nervous or anxious, and it used to be a lot worse when I first started this job, right? And then, like you just said, with learning information and targeting that to what you're doing, like targeting that in what role I play now, I definitely am more fight, but not in a physical
Right.
stance, but
Yeah.
more of a fight with like information,
Mhm.
and I feel confident in the skills to be able to address a situation.
Mhm.
But initially, when a threat does present itself, I feel that fawn initially, and I have to check with myself, take a breath, and then I'm able to use that information. But you have to access that.
You do.
If you naturally have a different response,
Yeah,
I think you do have to check yourself a little bit.
for
so.
sure. And almost like say, oh yeah, this is what I do.
Yeah.
This is what I do, but I know this person, I can get a bunch of information to them. And it's always good to triangulate to something else, like if somebody's aggressive or hostile, if you can, triangulate, like I said, the piece of paper. Why don't we each grab a piece of paper? Now you've taken the attention from being angry and blustery and aggressive to the fine motor skills, to writing. If you put a drink of water, listen, I'm so hot, let's get water, and you give someone a water and they drink, well now they're breathing. They're actually breathing deeply while they're drinking water. So they're calming themselves down, even though they don't know they're calming themselves down. So there's little ways that you can hack somebody's aggressive behaviors as well, and they don't know it. Sort of like the little secret hacks. So, are there any other questions on anything or something that I didn't address that you wanted addressed? Anybody? Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you. It's good to meet
Thank
you
you
all.
so much.
Of course, absolutely.
So good.
If you have any questions, you can always email Amy or Ashley, and they will forward me the information, and I can give you a call or give you an email if you think of anything when you're thinking about it and you're planning in your head.